Most trucking company owners can tell you they're busy, and they will. But somewhere between 20 trucks and 50 trucks, it gets harder to answer a different question. Are we actually growing, or are we just running faster than we used to day to day? Because these two things feel very similar. You've got more trucks, you've got more drivers, more revenues moving through the business, but it doesn't feel calmer. It doesn't feel clearer, and it certainly doesn't feel easier to manage. Sometimes this can feel like constant pressure. Nothing's on fire exactly, but nothing's ever settled either. You don't go to bed at night feeling like things are going in the right direction. And that's the part that messes with your head. Because on paper, things still might look okay. And this is usually where owners start thinking, why does this feel heavier than it should? And the frustrating part is there's no obvious thing you can point to that's broken. Welcome back to Driven for Success, the podcast for owners and executives of mid-sized trucking fleets who want fewer headaches, better drivers, cleaner systems, and a whole lot less chaos. I'm Mike Ritzema, owner of Superior Trucking Payroll Service and your host, where our mission is simple to help trucking families. In the last episode, we talked about what usually breaks first when you hit around 25 trucks. Today, I want to build on that with a question I hear all the time. How do you tell the difference between real growth and just being busier than I used to be? Well, let's start and break that down a little bit. First, we're going to talk about being busy. You got to understand this. Being busy is not an evidence of growth. It's just an evidence of being busy. There's an old John Wooden maxim or whatever you want to call it, phrase, proverb, whatever your thing is. That he used to tell his players. For those of you who don't know, John Wooden was a basketball coach at University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, in the 60s and 70s, and he won all the time. But one of his things that he always said to his players was, and he liked to teach this way, was through short sayings, was never mistake activity for achievement. So do you feel like you're acting all the time? You've got activity all the time and you don't have any achievement. That's frustrating and it's hard and it'll wear you down. And this is where a lot of owners start questioning themselves, not out loud, just in their own head. They go, am I missing something? Why does this feel harder than it should? The important thing to know is this happens. It's not a personal failure on your part. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. The fact that you're asking the question is actually a really strong sign that you can find the answer. If you're not asking the question and you're feeling that way, you should be asking yourself that question. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It just means that growth has changed the demands on the business and on what it needs from you. At 10 trucks, being busy meant things were working because you had your thumbs in all of it. At 30 trucks, being busy often means systems are missing. The danger is that being busy can hide problems for a long time. Revenue can go up, and as an accountant, I'll tell you that hides problems for a long time. Trucks can keep moving, payroll can still run, but underneath, the decision making, the clarity, and the consistency start to erode. And believe me, that's a problem that multiplies. Clarity and consistency are the keys to all of making your life easier. So, what does real growth look like? Real growth has a few quiet characteristics that don't get talked about a lot. Here's one, and it's a big one. Fewer decisions depend on you personally, not zero, but fewer. And I will tell you in the development of my own business, that is absolutely true. And it was absolutely something I got stuck on. I mean, it was, I felt like I had to have my thumb in everything. And it took a number of people just beating that out of me to make sure I didn't do it. And every time I am able to take something away from myself and let my people do it, every time it gets better. So just something to consider there. I mean, it shows up, but how will it manifest in your trucking company? It'll show up when people stop needing to ask you the same questions over and over again. They already know how things are supposed to work, not because they're guessing, but because you made the decision one time and you stuck with it. And man, that's a great feeling. Other signs of real growth here are problems repeat less often, because if you solved it once, it starts to solve itself again because your people just take care of it. Exceptions are actually exceptions. If somebody has the same exception 3 weeks in a row, that is not an exception. That is just how things go. This is one of my favorite ones just because it sounds silly, but it's actually really helpful. Decisions feel boring. Decision fatigue is real, just by the way. Like, that's a real thing. Having to decide over and over again will take out mental weight all the time. But when the decisions feel boring, they just happen. They just go. So, and the business surprises you less. Okay, those of you who are the owners out there, most surprises aren't good. At least that's how it seems to work. That's, less of those bad surprises. Always good. So what just being busier, now here's the other side of it, what just being busier looks like. Here's what false growth looks like. You're answering more questions than ever. You're approving more exceptions, and you're explaining the same decisions again and again. And you're making those same decisions again and again. It's just hard. Like, what makes it exhausting isn't the volume of work that your company's doing. It's all of the mental energy you're spending redeciding things that you've already decided before and then have to think about again. It's no good. And this constant having to make decisions drains your focus. It also reduces your ability to be strategic and think about things that would be better for your company in the future. Because you're having to redecide. Redeciding is just, yeah, it'll just suck the life out of you. So you really want to do it once and be done, because that mental load just takes a toll. It does, and it always collects it. So you want to make a decision once, as many times as you can, different decisions, and then not have to make that decision again. Here's some common signs that you're just busier. You know, every issue feels urgent. If you listen to other business podcasts, or you collect information on how to be better in your own business, one of the things that you'll hear from people is urgent versus important, and this is where this comes up. Urgent things have to be done right now. Important things need to be done for your business in the long term, and they're the best use of your time. And so some people will make a grid. Down the one axis will be an urgency scale, and the other one will be an importance scale. The things that are urgent and important, those are the things you need to spend time on. The things that are not urgent or not important, you should never even get to your desk, never even get to your phone. And then the urgent but not important, you should try and staff that out as much as you can. And the important and not urgent, give that some thought. There's all kinds of, you can find it everywhere. You'll find that anywhere online and you'll see it. But that's when you see you're just busier, is when you're living in the urgent instead of the important. You're busier when your margin erosion just shows up little by little. You're just leaking out margin all over the place. And that's hard too, and you're not quite sure why. Or when you hire more people, but that actually just makes you busier. Your clarity doesn't improve, your processes don't improve, you're not scaling with efficiency, you're just adding more people, you're just adding overhead. And the biggest thing too is, if you're busier, the business still needs you to hold it together. The business cannot function without you. This is a stage where owners often say, I thought growth was supposed to make this all easier. They have this vision in their head of, okay, when I get to 30 trucks, 50 trucks, 80 trucks, I'm just going to sit in the office. I'm going to do strategic things. I'm going to chat with our best customers, and I'm going to have a meeting to find out everything's great every week. And that's it. And then I'm going to go to Tahiti, Rocky Mountains, wherever you like to go. But what you found out instead is instead of you're trying to get to 80 trucks and you're at 40, and you're like, man, I'm working harder than ever. I feel like nobody can do anything without me. Yeah, that's a sign that, oh my goodness, you've got some things to fix there. You've got too much activity and not enough achievement. Are you wondering where you fall in this? Here's a simple way. It's a question you can ask yourself to know right where you are and to know what you need to work on. Ask yourself this: what decisions still depend on me that shouldn't? You've hired hopefully some quality people that have the capability to make decisions. You need to let them make decisions, and you need to give them you know, guide guidelines on how to make those decisions, and then let them do the thing that you hired them for. So when you ask yourself, what decisions still depend on me that shouldn't, you know, think about it. Is it things like pay decisions? Oh, are we going to pay like a detention schedule for your drivers or a bonus schedule or a whatever? Is it schedule exceptions? Again, that goes back to exceptions. Is it customer pricing, edge cases? Do you have someone who does the pricing for you or do you do it? And if you have someone who does it, do you let them do it? Or what about driver issues that always come back to you? If the drivers are, I mean, you should always engage with your drivers. The drivers are the people that do the work that make us able to be in business. But if there's a consistent, if issues are always coming back to you, that means that your people don't have the authority to solve the problem themselves. And the drivers know they just go to you. So they know they just bypass your HR person or your driver manager or whatever, anybody else, but your safety people, whoever is between you there. So, you know, a lot of times you think you hand these things off, but then the issues keep coming back to you. Well, that means you didn't really hand them off. You handed them off on paper. You drew a nice organizational chart and it had them down as safety, or HR or driver manager or shop or whatever, but you're still the one doing it. So that's usually, it's not ever good. Let me ask you another way. If you vanished for a week, you won an all expenses trip to Europe, you decided to go, but you couldn't take your cell phone, couldn't take your computer. What would stall out in your business? And there's probably a lot of things. I'm not saying you're never ever needed, but you should be able to leave if you've got 40 trucks, you should be able to be gone for a week and that business should still just hum. That should be your goal, is that they don't need you. That way you can spend your time on the more important things. But if the whole business would fall apart if you're gone for a week and you've got to check your email 17 times a day and you've got to take 16 phone calls when you're supposed to be at Disneyland with your kids and your family, that's the difference between growth and busyness. You're not growing, you're just more busy. Real growth will remove decision friction, and false growth multiplies it. So ask yourself where you're at. Ask yourself, am I having to be in more things or less things? And it's hard. I know it. It is, because you want everything to go absolutely perfectly. And that's good. But you also want it to go, you really want it to go absolutely perfectly without you having to be in the middle of it. So you got to put that last little phrase on there. It's really critical, because that's where real growth happens, because then you can spend your time focusing on the growth and finding better customers, finding better drivers, finding better equipment, all those things that are going to pay off for years instead of just worrying about today. So I know it sounds like a lot, and it is, but it's all fixable. So if this episode felt close to home, that's not a bad sign. It actually means that you're paying attention and you're asking yourself the right questions. And that's the start. You've got to ask yourself these questions. What decisions still depend on me? And if I vanished for a week, what would fail? Those are, you've got to be able, those are your leaks. Those are the things you got to fix. In this stage doesn't mean that you've stalled out. It doesn't mean that you can't grow beyond the 30, 40, 50 trucks that you're at. It just means where you've gone beyond the point where you can't carry this business alone just through brute force effort, which is probably and often what most companies have done to get from 5 trucks to 10 trucks to 20 trucks to 30 trucks. They just brute forced it, man. They just outworked everybody. And that's fine, because you were kind of in the founder stage, but now you're in we got to systemize stage. We've got to build systems. We have to have processes that are universal as much as any process can be, and let that process document, that system, run the company instead of you having to have your hand in every single thing. And it's not bad that you have to do this. It's actually a good sign that it's outgrown your ability to manage it. You still have work to do. It's just different work now. It's just different things than you did before. It's a different skill set that you'll have to learn. And you probably have the capability of learning it, quite honestly, because you've gotten this far. And a lot of trucking companies, if you're sitting at 30 trucks, so many trucking companies never get there, and you did. So you should feel proud of that. You should feel really good about that. But, now we've got to change what you're doing. It's not about working harder and it's not about being better. It's about designing the business you're already running instead of holding it together just with brute force effort. You're at the stage where how the business works matters more than how hard you work. And that's a really great way to look at it. Now, instead of moving the chess pieces, you're designing the game and you can make the game work for you. In the next episode, we'll talk about how owners usually need to stop doing things in order to scale past this stage. We'll see you next time.